Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this wonderful conversation between myself and Dan. I'm TJ. In addition to being the social media assistant for the library, I'm also an author. I write LGBT romances set in Appalachia. But I'll let Dan speak a little bit here in a moment. He's a great author. I hope you all enjoyed Water Dressed in Brown. It's a great book. Just finished it the other day. Lots of feelings. So Dan, I'll let you maybe introduce yourself a bit, since you're kind of a local celebrity.
Thank you. I wouldn't go that far, say local celebrity, but I was born and raised on the Eastern Shore. I was actually supposedly the first person born in Ocean Pines. No one knows if that's true or not, but my mom has claimed that for years, and no one's ever come to take the mantle from me. So I left and went to Indiana, Colorado, Ireland, New York City, lived there, and then came back in 2014 with my wife, and then had a child then. And
Awesome.
so live here now. We live in Salisbury now, but done a lot of different jobs and lived a bunch of different lives, I guess, in that time, and started writing recently.
All right. Well, awesome. Like I too am an indie author, so it's always nice to connect to other people who've migrated through professions before landing on writing. So you just said you had lived in a lot of different places, and I can see that refracted in the novel. So can you speak a little bit about how what's the role of place in this? Like that's sort of the guiding principle of this talk. So like, what is the role of place?
We had a conversation about this a while ago, briefly, about like what this should be about, and place. And I started thinking about place and what place even means. And I think there's location, right? Like location is the physical space something takes place in, whether it's Eastern Shore or New York City or Mars or wherever your location is, And then there's place, and place is more like setting, I think, where time matters, right, to place.
Yeah.
And weather matters to place, and it's not just a physical location, but it's an emotional location as well, and so I would say, I didn't do the math, but I would guess 85% of this book takes place on the Eastern Shore. Maybe 90% of it takes place on the Eastern Shore, largely in Worcester County, and it takes place in the 1980s and early 1990s, and that became sort of a character as I was writing, and it was a struggle because I had a bunch of different beta readers, and as you know, you send out the beta readers, you might hear back from a third of them, if you're lucky, So, and one of the first people to get back to me said, "Oh, you should get rid of the Eastern Shore, make it a fictional place."
And I can't imagine this book not on the Eastern Shore.
Right.
That just doesn't. That seems anathema to the entire sort of like ethos and spirit of this novel.
He had other good ideas, but this was a bad idea.
You're like, that's a bad idea.
It was a bad idea, but I thought about it for a while, and instead what I did is I leaned in further. I was like, no, I'm going to talk more about the Eastern Shore because of it, and then later I had an editor who was in New York City who had never been to the Eastern Shore, and I asked her specifically about that question, like, should I? And she's like, no. Like, don't change. She's like, I can't wait to go down there this winter. I've never been there, but I'm going to go down the winter just to see these yellow blinking lights. And I was like, you can't. They ended sometime in the late 90s.
So what you're saying is the Worcester County like Visitors Bureau should be like.
I think they should. They should be promoting this. Yeah, I do. But I do think that. But you would also kind of need a time machine to get that Eastern Shore. And I think that if there is a charm to the book, for local readers, it is, if they were here that time, it is very nostalgic. I mean, it's heavy nostalgia in this book. At one point, I claimed there wasn't nostalgia in this book.
I was gonna say,
and
I mean, I'm slightly younger than you, but even I felt the nostalgia, the nice tinted glow of the 90s. Like, and I think that the back cover, I think, says like the tail end of the analog age, and I kind of love that expression. So could you speak a little bit like why that phrase? Like, I think because it's a very powerful one, and it ties in with so much about the novel, which is about, there's a wistful tone, I think, to this book that calls to the Pisces in me. So I kind of love that there's this sense of melancholy and Laura sort of grappling with this restlessness. So there's a lot nestled in that blurb. So like, whatever thread you'd like to pick up on.
So the analog versus digital, that like was I worked in film and television for a couple decades, and when I first started, that was the whole debate, was analog versus digital. Is it film or is it video or whatever? Now there's no debate anymore. Right. It's long since gone. But there was a different quality to the actual picture when you had video versus film, and the film was much richer and deeper and had more like it felt realer.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, this is just an aside, but if you look at like old episodes of Murder, She Wrote that were filmed on film, they look sharper and crisper than say something that was like filmed on video.
Exactly. And so setting it in that time was a little bit of a cheat in order to make things seem realer, in order to make the characters feel realer, and things matter more, you know. And I think that, but then again, I also want to be very clear, like this was before cell phones, this was before screens, and it was right on the cusp of all these kids are people who would be working with cell phones and screens in their 20s. I mean, this is just, you know, this is the right at the edge of that. And so the characters have all this free time, and it's kind of like a stolen time. It was like the last moments of this era, where as technology is changing, they're changing as well. Yeah. And that the big theme of the book from the beginning was always change. Like for me, if you were like going to talk about what, like if there's one word the book's about, it's about change. And I kind of put I like to fill my writing with themes and symbols and stuff like that. So like anytime they drink coffee, there's a change that takes place. So like Laura has her big change when she's a junior in high school, or the summer between sophomore and junior year of high school. And she's in Chicago. She's with her father and his significant other, and they are, she's working at a coffee shop. So she goes through this change, and Todd takes her to get her haircut for the first time. And like, it's a big deal. It's like physical change takes place. She goes from being a girl to being a young woman, you know, and it was because she was working at a coffee shop. Yeah. And then throughout the book, whenever there's coffee, there's a change that happens to the point where she's sitting with Connor at the boat dock, and, you know, there's the fight between him and Trey, and she's drinking a coffee. Yeah. So it's like, it's there throughout the entire book of this, like, and so the whole book itself is about change, but the calling out the analog age, it's right as it's about to change to a digital world. So.
Yeah, and I want to sort of piggyback on that. So one of the things that sort of resonated with me, so as I said, I write like queer romances set in Appalachia, which people always look at me strangely when I say there's a lot of similarities between Appalachia and Delmarva, but they're both very rural, very isolated until the relatively the 60s, like very, you know, reliant on a set of like fragile industries. So I wanted to sort of like elaborate on what you were saying about the analog, because I think that the analog works very well in this novel because of its rural setting, like because this is sort of, as you point out, as the narrator points out several times, that like Ocean City isn't like this anymore. Like Ocean City is now this huge bustling, you know, tourist town. So one of the things that resonated with me is just how well you captured like the flavor of rural life, and that's part of the reason I love Delmarva, even if it has sort of developed more. But that's just something that I felt was very appealing, and it sort of ties together both the setting as place, but also setting as time.
Right. So, and thank you. So one of the things that I struggled with is, do you write this setting, this place, because there's a narrator who has an opinion, and I tried to get rid of as much of the narrator as I could, but like, do you write this place as Laura being right, and like by leaving, or Trey being right by staying, or whatever, you know, like what, like, and you have to kind of make it like the neutrality of the place in a way, but the character of Jessica is incredibly important to the book, because the time, like now, you know, a musician can come out and you can find out about this musician right now, on your phone. But at the time, you needed to go to a physical store and buy music, or you needed to go to a bar and hear that person play. You couldn't just watch a video
There was
online.
no Spotify.
There was no Spotify. There was no YouTube. There's no way to watch anything online. So you had to physically be in a space where that existed. And the person who is in New York but comes back, so the person that leaves and comes back is very important. So a lot like in your novel where, like, you know, there's someone who leaves, goes to California and comes back, and that coming back to a place is something I really wanted to capture, because someone who grew up here and left and then came back. Even the first time I came back,
right,
there's a lot of emotional things going on. When I lived in Ireland and was gone for a year and then came back after that and seen a different world, I saw this place totally different. And so the moment at the homecoming dance with Jessica, I wanted that moment of, like, for a second, her just being like, but it's so easy here. It's so to have that, you know. And so the place works in a lot of different ways with that. But specifically, I think if there's if there was a time when movement was very, very easy, and yet electronic, you know, transfer of information hadn't happened yet, it was right. The early 90s. Like, at that point, like, people were moving away, people were traveling for school. Like, it was very common for that to happen. And that might be the only time that existed, like this little small window.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I have to also say that, like, this made me fall in love with Delmarva all over again. I love it here. I've been here since 2018, and I love it. And I know that for me, like, writing about Appalachia has allowed me to, like, fall in love with my home state of West Virginia all over again. So did you find yourself falling in love with Delmarva again?
I will
there's
answer
so
that.
much funness.
I will answer that, but I want to ask you a question real quick.
Of course.
Did you write like Country Road Romance while you were there, or from here?
A little bit of both, like, because it was inspired, because I was on the board, and I'm on the board of the Appalachian Queer Film Fest, and I was sitting in West Virginia at the film fest and thought this would make a great setting for a gay romance. There's not a lot of those set in Appalachia. Here we are. So I wrote parts of it while I was visiting home, because there are locations. If you read it and you've been to my, like, hometown, you'll see elements of that. It's even more true in the book that's coming out in June. So, but a lot of it was also here. So there's a sense of, like, longing for home, which I think Laura feels. Even it's always complicated, you know. Like, if you're a queer person, or you're just like a restless soul like Laura, and you want to get out of the parochial, but yet there's no place like home. Not to be trite, but you know,
sure.
But you feel that longing, even though you sometimes feel like you can't go home. So it's very, very complicated, and you feel love for that place, even as it may not be what you remember it being. So those are all the kind of things that I was like, this novel is getting me in my feels, and I love it. Like, that's what I love about this.
Thanks.
So, because when I write romances, I want people to fall in love with the place that I love. Like, it's not just about these two characters that we want to love, but I actually want people to love West Virginia. And I felt like this is not like a generic romance per se, but it is very much a romantic story. And I feel like we fall in love with Delmarva as much as we fall in love with Trey and Laura.
That's interesting. A couple of people have read it and been like, "This is a love letter to the Eastern Shore," and I'm like, "It wasn't meant to be." Like, I don't know. I didn't.
That's so different, because I wrote my novel as a love letter to West Virginia to some degree.
Right, and you get that. Like, you get that when you go to the parents' house, especially in your novel. Like that was my favorite part by far of your novel. Like, I just love that.
Yeah.
You know, but I like family. Obviously,
right.
I enjoy family dynamics, and I think makes an interesting story in general, and also one that's usually not, unless horrible things happen, it's usually some lightheartedness can come into it at that point.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. So it's not usually as serious. But so to get back to it, I did not listen to a lot of music from the 90s in the last 2 decades up to writing this book.
Okay. That I find genuinely surprising. And
so like when I started writing this book, I was like, I should go back and listen to this music again. And I broke my Spotify. So now it thinks I only want to listen to music from the 90s. I'm like, no, I'm done writing this book. Like, there should be a done writing the book button on Spotify. It's
right.
Like, I would like to move on. So it's like, I know you want to listen to more Ani Franco. I'm like, I love Ani, but like, I need something new. So so that was a part of the experience, was a lot of the music. The other thing is, my wife and I, we lived in Queens for a long time, and at one point I was like, God, they can't even keep the movie theater, like they can't even keep it in focus. And it turned out I needed glasses, but I didn't know that. So I was driving, I was down here, and I was like, my headlights aren't working at night, like I can't see anything, like this feeling is terrible. And then I finally went to eye doctor, and he's like, did you drive here? Are you insane? It's like, you need glasses. I'm like, okay. I put the glasses on, and immediately I started to want to listen, especially driving at night. I wanted to listen to like early 90s Britpop. Oh. And I was like, well, like, this is odd. Like, why? And I was just like the biggest craving ever for like Pulp or Gene or Suede or whatever. Like, and I figured out, I think this was the last time I saw the world this way. Was when I was, was the 90s. Yeah. Which is very disturbing with how many miles I've driven. But, and so I think part of that, and the book came not long after that. So part of it is sort of just the way that I saw the world in general, like physically saw the world. But I don't think it changed my opinion of Eastern Shore at all. A few years ago I ran for office, and it was a weird district, and I had to go all the way up and down the shore, and met a lot of people, and that was very interesting. And I made a documentary about race on the Eastern Shore, and that was very interesting. And those two experiences changed my opinion of the Eastern Shore more than anything else.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Definitely more so than writing this. But it worked its way into this book, and then the editor in New York is like, you got to take a lot of that out. Like, so it ended up, most of it got cut out. There is a little bit of I think Don Rush is the only one that picked up on it, really, but there's a little bit of like a class between Catherine's parents and Dolores, and like there was a whole class thing. But like, honestly, they had scenes together that are gone. So it's like, how Don picked up on this, I think he's just looking for that wherever he goes. But that I don't think I didn't really get into that nitty gritty of it, which is maybe why people think it's nicer than it is.
I mean, but I do think that there's a texture to this novel that I really appreciated. Like, I feel like, I mean, again, I'm a transplant here, but I still felt like there's an authenticity, an emotional authenticity to both the characters and the way you capture like the rhythms of, and the sort of like classness of life here. And I felt that was really came through, but woven into the narrative so that it doesn't feel preachy. Like it makes sense for who these characters are and where they're located, like geographically, economically, and all that sort of thing.
Well, one thing I wanted to do with Trey is, and it's, look, I'm writing for myself, so I get to do whatever.
Therapy,
exactly. So I get to do whatever. So like a big part of like the whole, one of the big themes I'm writing about is like the failure of organized religion to reach, especially women, but Generation X, in general. So, but it's all hidden in there, and Trey is like your Jesus figure, right? And so like there's a lot of subtle religion throughout, because I grew up with a heavy dose of Tori Amos, and I'm Catholic, and it's a big part of the zeitgeist growing up that it mattered to me, and so I felt like it belonged in here, but I tried to keep it very subtle, and so subtle, in fact, that I don't know anyone that's read it that's been like, oh, clearly this is an homage to The Women Who Run with Wolves. But even though I mentioned Baba Yaga on page 1, but with Trey, I really wanted him to be like this, to represent this like broken promise, basically, right? So just even from his name, Trey being the third, something the third, you don't even know his name in the book.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, but he's
the third. That right.
But he is, he comes from this line of people who at one point had property and sold it off, so that all was left with these 2 bars. And his grandfather was a monster, like a horrible human being. and his dad was a monster, you
Right.
know, although he wanted to be a poet, you know, he wanted to be something else, and then turned into this, you know, monster by the Eastern Shore. And Trey was this great athlete who hurts his knee. And in those days, if you hurt your knee, you're done.
Yeah.
You know, now you're out 2 weeks and
Right.
you're back, but then done. So, so his failed promise, you know, of hurting his knee is just one aspect of it. But the other aspect is the, you know, the violence, right?
Yeah.
Like he hopefully that's also failed promise. Like he doesn't continue that cycle of violence, hopefully, you know, and at the end he seems like he's not, because he's become this child of the ocean and like embraced the, you know, the softer side of Jesus. So like if one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Trey, 3, Trinity. Like, it's all,
okay. I can see it.
Dolores, it means mother of
right.
God. So yeah, the whole thing. Anyway, so I have way too much time on my hands for that, right? You definitely
the
need
joy of writing is
like
seeing how these pieces fit together, and sometimes they emerge without you intending it. Like that's the sort of joy of creation, is that you sometimes just don't know what's going to happen, and you put your fingers on the keyboards or start scratching away on a page.
Well, definitely I think I edited this probably 26 different times, and after the first time I finished writing it, I went back and started editing. I was like, well, that character wouldn't do that. Like, why would I even think that character? They become their own at some point.
They do. And then you're like, well, actually, they are much different than I thought they were when I set out to write this.
Right. So there was a lot of change that happened with even the characters in the book. And originally, honestly, the book was more about Dolores than anyone else.
Oh, okay. Maybe she gets a prequel. Maybe there's a prequel novel or a sequel.
That would be interesting, actually, because I definitely said I wasn't going to do a sequel.
Never say never.
But a lot of people have been asking for one. But prequel is a really good idea.
The cinematic universe, literary universe.
Right. I didn't even think about that, because like I could do the whole his dad, and although then you find out what his dad's name is, and then you'll know what Trey's name is. That seems wrong. Anyway, so to get back to the place and the importance of the place, I think that one of the most important physical locations in the entire book is the Rickety House.
Yeah.
And the Rickety House is like, for, we talk themes, it's like nature versus society. It's like a visual representation of nature versus society. You have this house that is dilapidated, where nature is literally growing through it and succeeding. And when Laura goes there, the first time it's a party,
right?
And it's at night. And the second time, that's where she loses her virginity. And then the third time is she's alone, and she is totally silent, and she's just listening to nature and just fascinated and listening to nature. And then in the distance, you hear a wolf howl, because the whole thing about Trey, is he a wolf or not? And so it's like, because at one point he's described as a stone cold fox, and it's like, no, that's not fair. He's actually a wolf. Like,
so is this really a horror novel? Is that what
No, it's The Women Who Run with Wolves, which is the Clarissa Pinkola Estes book from the 80s that I'm obsessed with.
Right.
And so, so it's an homage, but really it ends up being Laura who's the wolf, not Trey. And Connor actually means he who loves wolves.
That's right.
So it's all so much meaning. So anyway, but at the Rickety House, when she's there and just experiencing nature and listening to it and totally silent, and it's during the day and it's the autumn and it's the best time of the year, I think that's the moment where the book changes. That's and I don't think anyone else thinks that, because the next chapter is when Dolores takes her to Buck's for the first time. Right. And then that night Trey comes over and they eat ice cream and listen to sad music and stuff.
Right.
So like everyone looks at that moment as the moment it changes, but really it's the moment that things changes when she's at the Rickety House.
Yeah.
So the physical representation of, because there's really like 3 different main settings on the Eastern Shore. There's Ocean Pines, there's the Rickety House, which is somewhere between Berlin and Snow Hill, and then there's Ocean City.
Right.
And the Rickety House is there's no trees around it. So other than the trees that are literally growing through the house.
Right.
So she's able to see stars for the first time and really like look up. And even when she's having her first sexual experience with Alex, you know, she's you're supposed to feel dirty at that point. Like it's supposed to be, and she's literally tripping in the dirt,
right?
Like over clods of dirt, but she's looking up at the stars, you know, which is sort of a, like the Oscar Wilde quote of like, you know, we might be in the gutter, but we're looking up at the stars, right. You know, kind of thing. And so that's sort of the idea there, is that she's messing around with Alex, and which everyone's supposed to feel is wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And
you're supposed to be with Trey.
Yeah, right. And you know, she even says much later, like, I know art is not for me. I'm not an artist. And Alex represents the artist, obviously.
Right.
And so like she's really trying to find her way. And so like at that point she's flirting with art, and it just isn't right for her.
Yeah.
So
I want to elaborate on that, because something that I've sort of been mulling over since I read the book and we've been talking is like this sense of, you know, of yearning, of longing, and sometimes of that being unfulfillable, which is a very weird, like, emotional space to be in. I mean, I'm a romance writer, so we know there's a happily ever after. Like, I know the conclusion, but this doesn't have that.
Does that have to happen in a romance novel?
Yeah. If it's a genre, like commercial genre romance, yes, absolutely. Because I don't care what they say on Threads. If you're writing a traditional romance novel, it has to end happily ever after or happily for now.
Right.
So I would call this novel like romantic, but not necessarily a romance in the like generic sense. And I love that about it. Like that's what I found so resonant, is this longing that these various characters feel. Some of them find their happiness in Delmarva, like Trey arguably finds it there, but Laura doesn't. Well, her father, who's queer, has to go away to find his happiness elsewhere. Jessica is what we would call ace, or on the ace spec. Now she also has to find it elsewhere. So like I really found it very compelling and resonant and emotionally authentic, these kind of different yearnings that people feel, some of which is erotic, some of it's spiritual, some of it's just emotional. So I feel like that all sort of, again, ties into place. And for some of them, Delmarva is a place where there can be fulfilled, but for many of them it isn't. And so I just think that's a really powerful kind of statement.
So Jessica, which is, I think, my favorite character. If I have to like name a single favorite character, I think it's Jessica. And people often ask me like, which one are you? I'm like, I'm all of them. Like, there's parts of me that are all of them. Any writer will tell you there are fragments of us in every character. But if there was one that I would say is probably closest to Jessica in terms of, she's the philosopher, right? Yeah. She's literally the light bringer. Like, she gives Laura her Christmas lights, you know, that like, so she actually like it's, sometimes I'm not subtle at all, you know, and she's the one that brings the music down from New York and everything. But, you know, when I want this book to be about love. It's about change, but it's also about love. And there's definitely the romantic love between Trey and Laura. That's obvious. And there's also like a lust love between Alex and Laura. But there's a platonic love between Jessica and Laura.
Yeah.
And it's probably the truest love in the book, or one of them.
I would 100% agree.
Yeah. And that is like, because part of what Laura's looking for is a family. And she felt like her family was broken apart when her father cheated on his mother and then had to leave. Her mother and had to leave. And that was the first time she kissed Trey, and she thought she was ruining her own family because Trey was really like her brother at that time. Yeah. And which is another thing. And Dolores was in a lot of ways her mom. And so she thought she was going to lose more of her family. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of thing. She was always looking for the family. So when she and Jessica have their spit handshake, when she brings her the lights, that is her finding a sister. Mm-hmm. and really, but whether it's a sister or platonic love or whatever it is, it's real solid love. And I think that's what led me to make Jessica asexual. I wanted her to be, I wanted to show how at that time there wasn't much known about, like, there wasn't, just like depression, like every kid, I coach high school lacrosse, not this year, but in the past. And every kid knows the word depression. They know what it is. Like
Right.
half of them are on medication for it or whatever. It's
Not
you know,
the case when we were growing up.
No, it didn't exist. Like we thought like if you were crazy, you went to a mental institution, they gave you a straitjacket. Like that was the only type of crazy you could be.
Yeah, or you sucked
You
it
know?
up and just kept going.
Right,
Like,
right.
Especially in rural places, like
Yeah.
where mental health is just not even part of their vernacular.
Right. And so like that I showed that, I hope I showed that with Trey, you know,
Yeah.
when he went through this depression. And similarly with Laura's father, when he cheated on her mom with a man, that was probably the biggest like crime you could commit in the mid 80s, when everyone was convinced that gay people had AIDS.
Yep.
Like because of the nightly news, which everyone watched and believed in those days, like there was that fear. So Jessica knowing like being with guys is wrong for me, this isn't right for me,
Right.
is like the first step in her journey. But there wasn't the concept of asexual then.
Right.
It was like, oh, you could be lesbian, that's okay.
Yeah.
But not asexual. Like you have to be something.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You gotta be something. And so that sort of like neatly fit into the platonic love. I like the Dolores like chosen mother type, the mother-daughter love, because you know at some point Dolores tells her you have to leave, and she has that conversation with her instead of Joyce. And I think that that is more meaningful coming from Dolores than Joyce, because Joyce only seems to have like one foot in that society
She
anyway.
does, yeah.
And whereas like Dolores is like trapped there, like this is her life and she's no choice. And so her telling Laura, you have to go because I've seen so many people stuck in this mud kind of thing, I felt made it a little bit stronger. But that I mean, you know, almost every character in the book is in some way related to Laura through some type of love.
Right.
You know, so
I have one more question, then I'll turn it out to audience. Because what time?
Sorry.
Where are we at on time?
Sorry, I talk too much.
No, don't believe me. I'm the last person to judge about that. Oh, okay, good. Yeah. All right, so I have one last question before I turn it over to our lovely audience.
Yes.
So, you know, for me, like I love longing, I love yearning, I love it in books and in real life, and so I love the way this novel ends with ambiguity. That, and I think it really gets to the heart of a very complicated emotional dynamic that many of us have faced at one time or another. Knowing that you love someone deeply, fiercely, passionately, but knowing also, maybe erotically, all the ways we think of love, but you know also that you can't be with them, like, or that they're not going to satisfy you and make you happy. Maybe no one will. And I think that's a really, I don't have words to articulate like why that's so powerful. Like I just think it's a really sophisticated sort of emotional core, and that's one of the things that I love the most. And I mean, there was the romantic in me wanted the novel to be like, I want them to end up together. I was like, Trey is not going to come to the airport, TJ. You need to accept that. Like, he's not going to come running up to the gate at the last minute. Like, that's not this kind of book. But you
like how I teased that, right?
I did, yes. I was
like, make the last scene in the airport.
But I mean, I knew it wasn't going to happen, and so I give you credit as an author to not take the easy way, because I think that's what makes this novel so extraordinary, is that it doesn't take the easy way, that it grapples with some really thorny, sometimes intractable emotional truths. And I think that as a culture, we're not really, as a society, maybe even as humans, we're not really trained or encouraged or even like possible to do that well, which is why I think fiction is so important. So I just wanted to give a hats off. Like, it was more a comment than a question, but it's something that I felt was like my thing that I loved about this book.
Thank you. No, I part of why, and I went back and forth a lot with what was really going to happen in the end. I knew that Laura was leaving.
To Luxembourg, right?
Yeah, and I knew it was going to be Luxembourg because that's where I flew into Luxembourg. It's the cheapest ticket you could get in those days. So
I mean, I went to Europe. I love that so random. It's so deliciously random.
The fantastic Apple Festival when we landed, and we're like, "Ooh, Apple
I assume
Festival."
You mean like the fruit, not the company.
Yeah, no, that's probably before. No, the company existed, but it was apple sausages, apple cider, apple everything.
I love that. I mean, having spent a lot of time in upstate New York, which is Apple country, I love Apple.
Yeah, it was very exciting. So, but that was pretty much all I remember about Luxembourg. It was a walled city, and that was it. But so I struggled a lot with where their relationship was going to be at the end, because I felt like Trey's character was too weak at the end in the previous iterations. I changed a couple things, and that I thought made him stronger. But part of the challenge was like, if Trey represents Jesus, right, and if Laura, from the beginning, the first line, which wasn't the first line of the book until the last edit, is whether Laura likes it or not, Trey matters. If she's someone who's searching for her stupid Buddhist moment, right? Like right. She's going out there looking for her her faith or spirituality or religion or whatever it is she's looking for. Her foundation is still going to be Trey, right? And so, whether she likes it or not, if she grew up Catholic, you're still gonna, like, when you smell that incense and you hear the music and you're in the church and someone's dead, like, you're gonna cry. Like right. It just works on that emotional level. And Trey, in the end, should have unconditional love for her, right? And like, how do you make a character who has unconditional love, like Jesus, not be super weak when someone's leaving, you know? And so I did it through music, and no one will ever pick up on this because it's such a random thing. But there was on the mixtape that he sends Jessica, there's a song called Seduced by Mary Coughlan. That song was only heard by about 100,000 people in Ireland in 1989. Okay. So it was not possible to get. There was no imports. There was no, like, you couldn't actually have it in Ocean City at that time unless someone who was Irish, like, gave you that song. And in this case, the idea is that the waitresses, the Irish waitresses that Trey is supposedly, having sex with and not caring about, he's obviously developed enough of a relationship to at least share music with them. And so maybe he's not as weak. And that actually, just knowing that little song changed the way I wrote that last scene with him, where he was it was much more of like more of a rounded person, and a little bit more comfortable. Like I knew a little bit more about his life because of that, changing that song. It's a weird thing, but like it mattered, in the way that he came across, because I think in the previous iterations, it was just like, it was sad to see what had happened to him. And now, big deal, he's missed one semester of college. You know what I mean? He's surfing every day. Yeah, he smokes pot, but everyone now smokes pot, so that doesn't matter. So it was and that helped the ending a lot for me, because then I was more confident in Laura doing the right thing and everyone just moving on in their own way. And so the Eastern Shore itself, I've said this a few times, the Eastern Shore basically is like this dirt that Laura grew out of. Like, she's the flower that grew out of the dirt of the Eastern Shore. And I know most people don't tend to like the term dirt. They don't think it's a good term, but someone who's grown a lot of plants, like, it's really important. Yeah, it is. And like, it's more important to grow the dirt than it is the flowers. Yeah. Like, flowers will just grow if you have good dirt. I
mean, I love that, because that's also something that comes up in a lot of like Appalachian literature, and the rhetoric about that literature is like the soil that we grow out of. And like I said, that's why I think that places like Delmarva and Appalachia work so well together as like conceptual spaces, because they're so rooted in ruralness, and who you are as a person is so firmly, like, as again, the metaphor, rooted in these kinds of places.
Yeah. And I think that the similarities between the two places, like, it comes across in Country Road Romance, because like, there's so much animosity between, what's the main character's name? Jared. There's so much animosity between someone just because someone left. I mean, really, what has he done? He's such a phony because he left. Like, come on. Like, all he did was leave, and I think he knows you're supposed to leave, and he just didn't. And that was and that is something that I've seen so much of here, from people. And I was literally told I had no choice but leave. I didn't want to leave when I was in high school. I was told I had no choice but to leave. I'm very glad I did. But like, it was one of those places where that's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. You're supposed to leave.
And it's an ongoing issue in both West Virginia. Now people are moving to Delmarva, so that's good. But that raises its whole other set of issues.
Yeah, no, it's trure. It does raise a lot of other issues.
So I just actually have 2 follow-up questions.
Yep.
These are throwaway questions. Is it Ani DeFranco that's in the diner toward the end, or did you intend it to be? I don't usually get hung up on like writerly intention.
What do you think?
I think it's cuter and funnier if it's not, like, because it seems like such a Laura thing to be absolutely convinced that this is Ani DeFranco, and then it's actually not.
Yeah.
So that's my interpretation. And then my second question is, do they get together in the future? in the expanded Dan's literary universe.
So one of the people that was my beta, and what is the C one, whatever,
Arc reader.
Yeah, she read like four times before I even published it. Just obsessed with it. She's already sent me an outline for what she calls season 2.
I love that in the acknowledgments.
And season 2, Trey is dating a professional volleyball player, which was very big at the time in Ocean City, and Joyce gets cancer, and so Laura has to come back to take care of her. It's really sad, but I think Jessica has a threesome with like 2 MTV VJs. That was the most random thing. I was like, did you not get the point of Jessica? So it was really a complicated season 2. And there was a lot of back to Ocean Pines things that happened. Why Joyce had to move back to Ocean Pines, I'm not exactly sure, but it was a whole thing.
Some people want to move home when they're afflicted with illness.
Yeah, but she was from Chicago. But anyway, yeah. Home. So right. So I do not have any plans of doing a sequel. I do have there's a book that I'm writing called No Notes, which I've just started on and done outline for, that is like a philosophical sequel to it, where it's 2 people who could be these people in their 40s, early 40s, and like sort of a romantic, dealing with other things and it would be like 2010s kind of time frame, early 2010s. So like 2012, I think, is when and it takes place in Burlington, Vermont. So yeah,
love that.
So it's a little it's like on a film set and this whole thing, and so it's a little bit different. But it could be the same characters, and I like in my mind they're the same characters, but like older and in different places and have different backstories.
Right.
If that makes sense.
No, a lot of people ask me if I'm going to write a sequel to Country Romance, and I originally said no, but I'm changing my mind. So that's why I was curious.
Oh, you are writing one?
At some point. I have my releases lined up for the next couple of years, but like.
So do they not stay happily ever after?
It's sort of like what do you do after the happily ever after?
Right.
Like, how do you like grapple? Because there's some other things like Charlie's mother. There's some stuff with her I want to work out. Like how do you make it work? Living in West Virginia as a gay couple, one of you is like sort of bi-coastal. So and there's a couple characters that I want to explore, like Paul, the ex, the Beverly Leslie type character. I think he has a redemption arc in him somewhere.
What was the really angry person in charge of the folk festival? No, the angry person was the publicist.
Yes, so Sherry.
Sherry,
yes.
And then who was in charge of the folk festival?
Crap. Yes,
Jackie. Is that right? No.
No, you asked me too fast.
Sorry.
That's okay. But yes,
maybe they could have.
I did think about that.
You did?
So that
okay. Sorry. Sorry.
It's on the radar. So I think that sequels are fun to sort of play with.
I mean, if I did a sequel, maybe it would be like the Tyrone Candace sort of story.
I love those two. Those 2 chaos gremlins. I think that they would make a fun couple.
Yeah. So, but no, it's so I purposely left it very vague if it's Ani or not. I think it tells me a lot about the person when they have an opinion of one way or another. And it I like that they all have their own opinions, so I don't ever want to say what I feel. Yeah. And honestly, it's changed like 10 times.
Yeah, it's probably changed for you too.
Yeah. And whether or not they get back together again, I don't think it's important for the story itself or for the characters, but it's certainly possible. Like I had clients who they dated in Ocean City when they were teenagers, and then the next two people they dated, they married.
Oh, okay.
And then after divorces and 30 years, they ended up getting married again. So like, you know,
life is messy.
You're right. Anything can happen for sure. But I think that I think what they represent, you know, I think it's very unlikely that Laura will live in the United States.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I think it's very unlikely that Trey will leave, you know, like Ocean City.
Right.
So the city.
Yeah, the city.
The
yep.
city. So.
Well, I think we have a few minutes for questions, and we have some folks here.
I've got a few questions.
Yeah.
And thank you, Dan.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
I really enjoyed this, and I think we should do this more often and have you back.
Yeah.
I think the fact we've got a book sale going on downstairs, and that's bringing in people who probably didn't know we were going to have a book sale when we scheduled this some months ago. So it probably a missed opportunity to not just have this like in a corner at one of the booths where books are being sold, because there's people coming through, and I think they would be drawn into an event like this because folks that are coming in to buy the books are interested in local authors too. So just a thought for as we think about planning for the next book sale.
Yeah.
That could be also something that brings in more customers to the book sale.
Absolutely.
And pulls in more audience participants for a talk like this, which is it's been really great. And TJ, you've done a very nice job drawing out information about the book too, and having read it carefully and asking good questions. So it's been really great. I'm curious about, the fact that you're a writer, and you said you just started writing, and if that's really true, or if you had tinkered with it but just had no intention to do anything with it, or if this is just a recent inspiration.
Oh yeah, no. So I've written my whole life. I mean, when I was 14, I'd write poetry, and I had a English teacher, Erin Drew, who actually the first time she had me for a semester first, and she hated me, I hated her. It was like we couldn't stand each other. It was a bad time. I was going through a depression, which I didn't know what it was. And I liked the previous English teacher, and this other, she had to leave because her husband's job, whatever. So the other person comes in, I'm like, I don't like anything about her. A year later, I had her as my English teacher, and she found out I wrote poetry, and she wanted to read more of it, and she really encouraged me, and became one of my favorite teachers of all time. Like, it just phenomenal. Became a friend. She unfortunately passed away suddenly years ago, but she really encouraged me to write more, and I did. But I never went to school for it or anything like that. Yeah. And then when I dropped out of college, I wrote for like a magazine, like a local. It was called Slam, Street Legal Arts and Music, and
that seems very on brand.
Yeah, and then that was in South Bend, Indiana, and then I moved to New York, and I wrote for a .com called Urban Box Office, UBO, specifically Indie Planet's channel Words, WORDZ, and I worked in film. Like, we also went and interviewed people and shot videos of it and stuff. So my first interview ever actually was Victor Lavelle, who's a great writer, and he had just written Slapboxing with Jesus. He was still in Columbia at the time, and so went and interviewed him. I had a micro cassette recorder. I bumped the table and it fell on the floor, but I tested it and it still worked. It was literally for my first question. I was so nervous. And when I went back to listen to it, I interviewed him for about an hour, and then we hung out, went to a party. So I hung out for him for 3 hours. I had 5.5 minutes recorded on and the rest of it was unusable because I broke them.
I'm hoping that doesn't happen with the recording.
Yeah, no. But but it was fantastic. So that was a great experience. But then, and then throughout I would write, when I met my wife, I was writing a book called Night Swimming, and she was an REM fan. And so that's why she decided to go on a date with me. She found out that I was writing a book called Night Swimming. I've written books and then finished them and then just left them. I've written stuff and burned it because I heard Salinger did that. I would write a lot when the inspiration hit me. This was the first time, and I wrote a memoir about my father and mental illness and sports and stuff like that. So, and that I actually saw through to the end. But this was the first time where I got to the end of a book and I knew it was good. I didn't know it was great. I don't think it's great still, but it was good.
None of us ever do.
Yeah. But, and I said, like, I want to experience what it's like to get this all the way and I was like, it can't be that much harder. So hard.
As seriously says, you sweet summer child.
Right. I mean, it really was another year after that before I was done. And my family, very kind, but I was like, I'm writing today. And they're like, are you really doing anything? I'm like, yeah, I'm writing. Yep. So I need time to write. And I could never find enough time to write. And I really, for a while, I really pushed through and spent about 6 months of just almost nonstop writing. And I'm sure there's faster ways to do it, and better ways to do it. But for me, it was a lot of trial by error, So I've written, I wrote and directed a movie and written other movies, and so I've written some plays, and so yeah, I've written
I
before.
think that every writer's path is different and very crooked, and like some of us write lots, some of us write little. Like I think that's the thing about writing and why it's so much fun is that there's just so many different ways to go. But is there nothing as satisfying as when you open up that first box?
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yes, it's the physical thing. Cool. Like that's there's really no magic quite like it.
Well, my wife did the cover for it, and it was very. I thought the cover was fantastic.
It is truly awesome.
And it was very exciting to open up that book and see it. It really. This is the first time too. Like the last book, I had a friend put it together for me. This was the first one that we did completely, ourselves. Yeah. So it was very exciting to see that. Yeah.
My next question is about influences, and I am curious about what authors have shaped the way that your writing style and also your desire to be a writer. But I was also interested in, you talked about music and how listening to music was important for your creative process, and how even putting one song onto a mixtape ended up shaping the narrative for you. So I'm curious actually about the 90s music that played sort of the biggest part of how you listened and turned that into the story.
So influence-wise, I dropped out of college, and when I did, I was worried I was going to become dumb because my roommates, who I was very competitive with, were still in college, and I wanted to be at least as smart as them. So my next door neighbor was an English major, and I went over to her and said, I don't want to be dumb. Can you give me some books to read? And she's like, have you read Huckleberry Finn? And I was like, it was assigned to me, and I did not read it. Because that was pretty much the story of my life, was like, I would be assigned books. I'm like, no, I'm gonna go read, Thoreau, but I'm not gonna read, whatever. And so I read it, and I was like, this was fantastic. And I realized when you're reading on your own pace for fun, how wonderful reading was. So she gave me like Great Expectations. She gave me like, a bunch of classics. I became like just enamored with reading and would read anything I could get my hands on at that point. And then I moved to New York because a friend of mine from Kazakhstan wrote a manifesto about living life, and I read it one night and was like, I'm done with South Bend, and we just moved to New York in the middle of the night. And we get there and went to Williamsburg, which was, like at the time, just lofts and artists and one coffee shop. And I went to the coffee shop and I sat there and I was drinking coffee all day long and writing in my journal. And then I left and there was a bookseller on the street and I started talking to him about books. And he's like, what's your story? I'm like, I just moved here. And he's like, oh, he's like, you don't even have to pay for it. It's like, you got to read This Side of Paradise. It's from F. Scott Fitzgerald.
It's a terrific book. I read it in high school. It
Yeah.
was hugely influential.
Well, like reading it the day you move to New York is perfect. And it really was one of those perfect things. And so I was working at EJ's and I was reading it at EJ's and my manager's like, oh, you read Beautiful and the Damned, right? And I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what you're saying. Like, he's like, oh, you got to read Beautiful and the Damned. I'm like, I thought he just wrote Great Gatsby. Like,
nope.
So by far, those two books were the two most influential books, probably in my writing style. And you kind of see it. Like, this is an old style of writing. Like, it starts off with like a long prologue in the beginning, from youth to a certain time, and it's very like This Side of Paradise. You kind of get that same thing with him in Minnesota and stuff until he gets to Princeton or whatever. So it's been a minute since I moved to New York. It's been a while since I've read that. So I would say that was probably one of the bigger influences in me. And then Clarissa Pinkola Estes's book, Women Who Run with Wolves. I think you gave it to me. I think my mom gave it to me, and it was just a huge influence on my thought in general. And so a lot of times, like my next book I'm working on, it's like a whole fairy world and stuff, and Baba Yaga is like a main character. That's so it's the wild woman archetype, thing that became a big influence, less so on the writing part than on just the story itself. And the characters. So to get to the music, I write mostly listening to jazz or classical music. But when I drive around thinking about the story, because I have to think about it other times, I will listen to music from the 80s and 90s. When they were at Homecoming, I had a whole Homecoming playlist, like 2.5 hours of songs. And at one point I had listed them all, and my editor in New York's like, you're killing us. Like, why do we have to read 2 paragraphs of your songs?
Well, that's what you need you need a website with not like a book playlist.
Right.
It's very popular these days.
But I do have a playlist for this. It's 4.5 hours long, and that's all the songs that are actually mentioned in the book. So, and then the first iteration of the first chapter was, because it was mostly about Dolores, listed her least favorite types of genres of music to her most favorite. And there were like 40 genres like in there. Like, she has thoughts on trip hop, and it was not high, but it wasn't low. It wasn't as low as you think. The lowest was modern country. It was, it's like the worst. So, which is funny because she liked, bordering on pornographic romance novels. Right. So which is one of the things that survived from that. So, love you. So the characters influenced the music I listened to, which was kind of interesting. And I knew that I was introduced to Ani DiFranco late. My wife introduced me to Ani DiFranco, really. I'd heard a couple songs, but like, she was a big fan, so I listened to a lot of it because of her. But I feel like that's kind of like, anytime there's like a secret knowledge, kind of thing that's stolen, whatever, like that's passed from one person to another. I feel like Ani DiFranco is one of those types of musicians. So obviously she's a big influence in the book, not just because of the name of the book comes from one of her songs, but that is the first turning point in the book. Is when Laura hears her music, and it's sort of like yes, something happened between Trey and his family, and her whole world turned upside down. But like the next new song she hears is Out of Habit, and which is not all about coffee, but a little bit about coffee. So hence water dressed in brown. Coffee's just water dressed in brown. So yeah. So I think I answered your question. Ani DeFranco, listened to a lot of her. I had to get very specific about what I could listen to when writing certain chapters, because I wasn't sure when stuff came out. So, and the characters are actually a year older than me. So like, I was like, I was listening to this in high school. I was like, but they wouldn't have, because this was the next year. So that's why, a full year went by in Notre Dame before Trey sent her the tape, so we'd catch up to the songs that was the end of high school for me. So.
Do you read a lot yourself still? Like, and what is your pattern of reading?
I try to read. I wouldn't say I have a pattern. I drive a lot, and so I listen to Audible, and a lot of times I listen to Audible. I listen to a lot of Stephen Fry stuff because I have anxiety, and he reverses that. His voice is just wonderful. So currently I'm going through, for the third time, the complete Sherlock Holmes. I just finished How to the Baskervilles. And now I'm on the Return of Sherlock Holmes. I read books that people give me, or that friends of mine write. So I'm like very much like, I haven't read Into the Night yet, and I want to. I have like a stack of books that I haven't read your new one yet. So I try to balance that with books I hear about. My mom gives me a lot of books or tells me about books from a book club. I don't like most of them. Someone really pushed Theo of Golden to me, and I didn't go to the book club, thankfully, that was doing it. But like, I feel like in 5 years, no one's going to, I know we're recording this, so I shouldn't say anything, but like, we're not
going to keep this as a permanent record and come back and
I know.
This in 5 years.
I'm not a fan of it. I stopped reading it after 40 pages or something. And I started doing that more in the last couple of years. I used to like power through books, and I stopped doing that. I'm like, life's too short. So I do, but like River Why, which I mentioned, that was written in the 80s maybe. And a friend of mine whose wife just passed away, he gave it to me. So I was like, I'm going to power through this one. Got to page 60 and then loved it. And so like, now I think maybe I should give everything 10 more pages. Midnight Library, I read that. I started reading it. I was like, ugh. I asked someone at a bookstore, I want something light that like I can read on a train that won't make me sad. And they're like, here's the Midnight Library where the person kills himself in the beginning. And I'm like, what?
That's like,
if you didn't tell me that part. And so like, I'm reading on the train. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, this is ridiculous. So I put it away, and she gave me another book that I got, which was In 5 Years, which I'm not a fan of. And I started reading that, and I was like, this person's going to die. And they did, of cancer. It was horrible.
Oh.
So this is the worst recommendations in this bookstore. But I had nothing but the Midnight Library at an open house, and no one came to the open house. So I ended up reading it while I was there, and I ended up really enjoying it. I did end up liking it. So I had no choice. But I, it, even though, I'd already gotten through the bad part, I guess.
Right.
So I wouldn't say I have a pattern at all to reading. My friends write all different kinds of stuff. So, like I'll be reading, romance novels that take place in Appalachia, or, the next thing is a sci-fi thing that my friend in New York writes. And then the next, whatever it might be. And then I read a book about fishing and, whatever. So I do. I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I used to do a lot of nonfiction, and although I read How Emotions Are Made, or I listened to it, which is a fantastic book, and I bought it to read it right after I finished listening to it. It was that good. Like, it was probably the best nonfiction book I've read in 5 years or so. So, Braiding Sweetgrass, another great one. That actually is pretty influential on, like, Braiding Sweetgrass is it's nonfiction, but it's also a lot of like mythology in there and stuff. So, big fan of that. And I used to be on the board of the Wicomico Environmental Trust. So we had a book club, and so I read a lot of environmental books then. So I kind of went the other direction after,
Yeah.
So sorry for the long answer.
No, that's what the fun about being a writer is, what you read. I mean, I don't read a lot of literary fiction, which I would classify this as like contemporary lit fiction, but this held me wrapped. So I give you a lot of credit for holding me, even though I read a lot of genre and I read a lot of like hisfic and history and like biography, but I don't read a lot of this kind of fiction.
Yeah.
But I'm leaning into like regional fiction a lot lately. So I really applaud like your ability to keep a skeptical reader.
Thank you. Do you think that could be young adult?
Not. I mean, because there's two ways of answering. Much in the same way I would answer that about romance. Like it's romantic, but not a romance. I'm not sure that generically and commercially it would fit within like young adult.
Okay.
As that genre is conceived of commercially.
Right.
In spirit,
Why
yes.
not?
I think because it's too emotionally. I mean, I think maybe young adults should read it. Let me put it that way. But I think it's a little more emotionally mature than what I think a lot of YA is typically marketed as. And YA is an increasingly complicated category because like a lot of adults write it, but it's also very fraught in online spaces. And there's it's just it's a messy place. It's part of the reason I don't write YA, even though I feel the yearn sometimes. I'm just like, this is a very complicated
What's
space.
new adult? Do you know what new adult is?
Yes, that's where it's basically like 18 to 25.
I think it could be new adult.
Yes, I would say that
Yeah.
That I would say yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Someone's like, you got to do young adult. You got to market young adult. People love young adult, and I'm like,
they do, but it's a very fraught space. Like but new adult, absolutely, 100%, because it's basically a Bildungsroman. Not to get all English major, but it's a Bildungsroman. Like it's a coming of age novel.
Because the ALA has an award called the Alex Award, which is awarded to adult novels that I forget the terminologies, but that applies for young adult, like young adults. So it's young adult friendly, but it's an adult novel, and I would maybe classify this kind of that.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
I always wondered. So
no,
should have gone to school. What is the coming of age? What's it called?
A Bildungsroman.
Wow.
I mean, you can take the boy out of the PhD in English, but you can't take the PhD English out of the boy. But yeah.
But you never took writing classes? Like you did a PhD in English, but never took
because I was on the lit side as opposed to the creative writing side. And plus, I mean, up until recently, a lot of MFAs have been not particularly like invested in genre writing. And I've always been a genre person, first fantasy, then romance. And that's changing as MFA sort of like acknowledge that it's genres that keep the publishing industry going.
Yeah.
I also, it's just a self-confidence thing. It's like, I'm not good enough to be in an MFA. And it's only now that I'm like actually like writing and publishing, like actually I'm a good writer. And it's so much like you, I learned by reading. Like I learned by reading the things that I wanted to write.
And what did you read like when you were in school? What did you need to
as far as like in graduate work? Because I did film studies, so I actually watched a lot of movies. So I wasn't in the lit side, but I primarily read like 20th century, like some 20th century American, some Victorian, just a little bit all over the place. Because we were a very small program, and so we had to sort of take classes across the.
And what film did you focus on?
I did like classic Hollywood, so like 1930 to like 1965, give or take.
Cool.
And I did like biblical epics.
Yeah.
So that's my specialty.
Biblical epics.
Which comes in which plays more in the fantasy novel that you alluded to than it does in the romance, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I've leaned into reading a lot more Appalachian fiction now that I sort of situate myself at the confluence of like romance and Appalachian fic. So two very different things that don't always play together. So it's interesting to grapple with the sort of genre play.
And do you ever read like have you read River Runs Through It or
Not
like
yet.
Montana 1948 or
I
any
have
of
not.
those? Because I feel like there's a lot of similarities between Appalachia area and that Montana, like,
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah, it's you know, probably the best adaptation of any novella ever was River Runs Through It.
Okay.
Like it was almost word for word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only recently that I've sort of like returned to my roots after spending 20 years running away from Appalachia.
Yeah.
Like, returning and reading the lit and like, you know, using that to inform like what are the things that I, as a romance writer, which again is a different kind of like set of generic and literary influences.
And did you ever read like what's his name? The Floating Opera. He was
John Barth.
Yeah, John Barth.
No.
So
Bad English.
he was Cambridge, lived in Cambridge, I think, and I'd never heard of him. I mean, born and raised here, and I was working as a PA, and I was reading The Art of War at the time, and I was the scariest looking PA, ripped shirt, smoking a cigarette, reading The Art of War, and
I love that. I love that image so much.
Some other PA walks up to me. He goes, "Art of War." He's like, "Ah." So he starts talking, and he finds out I'm from Eastern Shore. He's like, "Oh, you must know John Barth." And I'm like, "No, where does he live?" And he's like, "I don't." But he's like, "It's like a famous writer." Like, it's like, how must I? There's plenty of people live here. I never heard of him.
That's
and
the thing.
He wrote one that's set in Salisbury University, like it's the entire thing. It has a different name, but it's clear that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like he's a professor, and it's a sequel to
Floating Opera.
yeah.
Floating Opera is great.
Yeah.
The one after that, because that's like a novella or maybe a really long short story.
Yeah.
One after that was like The End of the Road
That's
or
the
something.
one.
End of the Road.
Yeah.
That's at Salisbury
That's the
University.
one that's set in SUVM.
Gotcha. I don't
Before it was
think-
called SUVM.
Yeah. Salisbury State College.
Yeah.
Salisbury State. So the women's
Normal school.
teachers school, something. Yeah.
I think it was a normal school at one point.
Was it normal
Yeah.
school? Pretty normal. Yeah, but it was funny that in New York I found out about John Barth.
I mean, but that's not uncommon, right? Like a lot of times people who write regionally are often unknown in their region, but are known famously. Like that happens a lot, especially like in places like Appalachia.
Well, he passed away a few years ago, and there was a article in the New York Times about it, but not in the Daily Times. You know what I mean? Like, it was like that doesn't like
My point
explain
exactly.
everything.
My
It's
point
like-
exactly.
Yeah, it's like what? Yeah. So, yeah, but yeah, I don't know a lot of. I mean, I don't know of a lot of writers from this area until recently.
Yeah.
And now it's like all of a sudden, it's,
I mean, I
a
went
lot
to,
easier to
Yeah.
write. Yeah.
and like I said, some of us spend a lot of time like fleeing our origins, and then when we come back to it, we're like letting it just sort of immerse myself in this literary world.
Yeah.
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 Thanks. This is great.
Oh, my pleasure.
I will try. Let's make sure the actual recorded. I always dread. I'm like, no, did it stop?
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh no,
Yeah.
it works.